Right, well, thank you everybody for joining us for this webinar. I am so happy to introduce Sue Hayes, who is coming to us out of the High Desert Education Service District. She's been a speech pathologist for more than 20 years and has been on our TBI team for, looks like just about that long. Sue has this passion for working with kids with transition. And so today she's going to be talking with you about post-secondary transition and students with TBI. So Sue, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Great. Hi, everybody. This is the weirdest thing, not seeing any faces. So, you know, speech pathologists, we love faces and we love to talk. So I'm talking to a screen, which is so unusual, but welcome, you guys. This is a super fun topic, and I'm hoping when you leave, the goal will be when you leave today is that you feel you'll feel comfortable taking anything out and using it with somebody. So I'm glad you're here. On the title, you can see that it has hearing the student voice. And again, as a speech pathologist, I think most speech paths would agree we're great at talking. And as I've gotten older and maybe a little wiser, I've learned that listening is probably the skill I really need to focus on. So it's really important as we're holding students in like a vulnerable position of sharing what their life dreams are, that we really become good listeners. So hearing the student voice was key here. They say that listening is the closest thing to showing somebody that you love them. So I always like to make sure we really hone in on the concept of listening. I'm going to start with a story. I went to a high school a couple years ago and sat down and talked with a girl. She was a senior, and she wanted to be a secretary or administrative assistant. And she had been doing a job share, which was great, a job shadow in the office at the school. And in talking with her, she believed that she was just the best at this job. And in reality, the women who were working with her said, oh my gosh, I don't think she's going to be able to do this job. She has these lacking skills. And here this girl is saying, well, my dream is to go to the community college and become work as an assistant to somebody. And so boom, right off the bat, I realized that, dang, it would have been nice for that group to have been treating that job like a real one, meeting with her and reviewing her skills and helping to raise her awareness, which we know can be difficult for individuals with brain injury, and so that she's more prepared, for the next step. At the same time, we were talking to her about her mobility, and I asked her, okay, so how are you going to get to the college? And she said, well, I'm gonna learn to drive. She didn't have her license yet, but she might have had her permit. She's a senior, and she said, I'm a great driver. And I'm like, that's great. She goes, except I can't make right turns. And I thought, oh no, I don't think you can get to the college if you can't turn right, right? So anyway, starting with a story like that, there is a need for us to be able to sit down and spend time listening to the stories and the dreams and the hopes of individuals that have had a brain injury, and taking the time to really be present with them. So let's get moving. You have the toolkit, I think, Amanda sent information out, so you've either got it downloaded on your computer or maybe you've printed it out, which would be really helpful. If you've just downloaded it, we will be going to the toolkit off and on, so just know that you're going to need to click into it. So make your plan. I just threw out a thanks to the people who helped write this. Thanks to all you guys. And also there's some handouts, I think, that Amanda sent to you guys. We will be looking at those. I'll show them on my screen also, but if you have them printed, you might take notes on them. And they're also a lot easier to read if you have them printed. If not, I'll still be talking through them. And I apologize that they're not as clear as they could be, but I didn't have the originals, and my copies were on bright colors. So. Also in this webinar, I want you to engage and interact a little bit. So we're going to use the chat box. Right now, Amanda, I can't see the chat box. Maybe I can expand it. I don't know. we'll see.
Okay, well, I'm watching it too, Sue. So if you want, I'll just read it to you if people put anything in there.
Okay, so I need you guys to put things in there. So I want you to start getting the feel of what it's like to be, you know, in a position where somebody's asking you questions that, you know, can be kind of heartfelt. We're not going to hit a lot of those, but we expect, you know, people to sit down with us and have these conversations about their future. And so I want you to get involved, and no judgment, whatever you say on the chat box. This is a safe group, and share some of your thoughts. I'll have specific questions for you to answer. So we are going to be doing that. The toolkit is developed for individuals that have receptive and expressive language base. So just so that you know that. Give yourself the gift of being present. Again, I believe when you sit down with anybody to do work like this, you know, you need to be there for them. So I know you guys have come off of crazy days. You've maybe just started eating your lunch. I remember, I know how crazy it can be when we're doing this great work. And so if you can also just be present with us, we'll get through this 1 hour webinar and you can leave with some really cool things to use with the people you work with. Okay, so if tomorrow you were asked, oops, sorry you guys, to support a student with the brain injury and planning their post-secondary transition, where would you rate yourself on this scale? So this is the first question I'm asking you. Maybe you feel super comfortable. You have lots of information. You have tools you're going to grab to have these conversations. You've done it before and you're in a rhythm. Maybe it's a stretch for you, and you know you still have some things to learn. And maybe it feels kind of dangerous, like, oh my gosh, I have no idea what I'm gonna do. We use scales like this working with people with brain injury all the time. So I want you to feel what it's like to have to respond to, you know, how does it feel for you? So if you can share in the chat box, I'm gonna see if I can expand, if I can see it. There, now I can see it. Let's see if I can, there we go. Good, great, okay, some people are comfortable. Lower end of stretch, I love it. A big stretch, even after all these years. Hey, Wendy. Danger. All right, keep them coming. Yeah, okay. We have people at all kinds of levels, and that's just the way, you know, it is when we're learning something. And even me, I will say, I remember when I first started doing this work, totally felt dangerous. I still have my moments where I go into situations where I'm like, I don't know, but great. Thanks for your honesty. And keep thinking about that. So as we move through, the next question is, what would move you into a comfort zone? So if you wanted to feel more comfortable about sitting down with people and holding them carefully and working to help them plan their life dreams and their transition, what would help you? So I'll give you a second to answer that in the chat box too. For some people, it might be, I need to have specific tools. For some people, it might be, I need a mentor. For some, I don't know. Knowing resources and community, absolutely. That's a tough one for so many, right? Okay, time to get to know the person. Building relationships is key, right? Having information and tools. Thanks, Carol, Robin, Wendy. Yep, having a mentor. Yeah, watching somebody do it. Hey, Nikki, thanks. Okay, Emily. I don't know what I don't know. Perfect. That's great. Okay, think about that for yourself, and hopefully we'll move you further along today, even with only an hour. Okay, so where do we start? We know that we must coordinate services between our agencies. So we want seamless transition for these individuals, especially when they leave schools to go to, you know, adult life, and so. It's really key that we do some work related to person-centered planning. And we know that individuals with TBI may experience cognitive, behavioral, physical, and social emotional challenges. It's important to hold and know that those things exist. I'm going to whip through this. These were just some of the thinking as I was starting to kind of brainstorm the toolkit. I knew that I had students I was working with that lacked initiation, didn't have a lot of intrinsic motivation, executive functioning issues, and they had a lack of awareness. And we know that all those things can impact planning, right? There could be a way bigger list there, we know, but the reality is those are really impactful when it comes to making a futures plan. And what we know with everybody is that we want our lives to be meaningful and purposeful, and we'll touch bases on that in a minute. The other thing is we have to get started in getting started with this whole process is we have to understand that teaching in the natural context promotes generalization. So there's a lot of research in brain injury about making sure that you're working with people in the environment at which they need to learn a skill. So pulling them out and working with them when you're trying to teach them in an isolated environment isn't always as effective. Now, when you're doing this kind of planning, you might be doing that. So you have a place where you can talk and carry on a conversation that's free of distractions. Environmental setup is key to any success for a plan. Transition planning can be full of emotion for families and students, right? Because so many things have changed. And students are answering questions like, well, who will I be as an adult and who am I since my injury? Or what will I be as an adult and who am I since my injury? And all of us, if you normalize this a bit, are raising all kinds of questions for ourselves as we move through our lives, but we know that whenever we hit trauma and we don't feel like ourselves, it's that much harder. When we go through trauma, you and I and those we serve all desire to have meaning and purpose to our life. So I like to see that at the end of any process when we're doing this, that's what we're helping people create. I mean, sometimes we want to focus just on the job, but sometimes it's just really about that they feel like every day they have a reason to get up, right? And here's what's cool about sitting and using tools like this or having conversations about future and life and transition is that most of us love to talk about ourselves. That's just the reality. I have never gone to a school and talked with a student when they didn't think I was just amazing because I'm the person that sat down and listened to them, right? People are so busy. You know, in your life, when somebody sits down with you and actually gives you time, that's so valuable, and it can move you a long ways. So we all like to talk about ourselves. And of course, many of us could use a coach. And I think that any transition plan requires somebody who's going to sign up to be that person. You know, who's going to be that person that's checking in and helping to support. All right, so we talked about students just a little. I know this is super quick. I usually do this training, by the way, for a day. So we're whipping through some stuff in an hour. Challenges for family involvement. We know they see their son or daughter with rapidly changing abilities. It's hard to be responsive to that. That oftentimes they're all pursuing pre-injury transition plans, and those may come to fruition and those may not. And so that's hard. And you'll see that I have noted grief and adjustment on this list. Family and student are unaware of students' set of strengths and challenges. Sometimes you kind of have to, you know, start a little bit, not from scratch, but, you know, from a whole new homeostasis. Families may feel protective and find it difficult to promote autonomy. They may have just been, you know, praying to have their child live through an accident, and, you know, likely you're going to be protective. But yet students eventually want to become autonomous, but yet they need family support. So there's just a lot of things going on with family. If you haven't ever heard Roberta De Pompey talk on family and TBI, find a way to do that because she has some amazing information to share. All right, so today our goals to refresh ourselves on some of the research that supports transition. We're barely touching on that. Get a feel for the transition toolkit. We're going to look deeply at 2 tools and lightly on 2 tools. That's my hope. And so get comfortable. I want you to get comfortable so you can try it all tomorrow. So let's start off with my story. One year, it was Christmas time. I think I was 50 pounds overweight. It's great. I'm not 50 pounds overweight anymore. But at the time, I really wanted to lose some weight. And I have this lovely daughter-in-law, and I called her and I said, I know exactly what I want for Christmas. They had no money. And so I'm like, this is something you can give to me for free. And I need somebody to help me be accountable to lose some weight. And she said back to me, great, I've got the right idea. I've got an idea. It's going to be perfect for you. So at Christmas, I got a package. And I was thinking she was going to help hold me accountable. And what I got was a package. And when I opened it up, this is what it was: the Game On Diet. Kick your friend's butt while shrinking your own. Right? And I'm like, okay. And it's a team thing where you have teams, you're on a team, you're trying to lose weight, you have to fill out your little chart, your team members are filling out a chart, and you're competing against another team. Well, the last thing I really wanted to do was enter a weight loss competition, but that's what she gave me, and I thought, okay, I'm willing, I'll try it out. So I did, and I gained like 2 pounds the first week. So it didn't work for me. So the lesson is that had she just said, hey, what is it exactly you want me to do? And maybe the thing she gave me for Christmas was a little note saying, I agree to be your champion and your coach and your encourager, and we can meet once a week by phone or whatever. That would have been super helpful. I think the other thing that this teaches is that sometimes we make plans for people instead of with people. So that's so key, because that was for me, that didn't work at all, and I didn't get what I wanted, right? But I thought I was trying to be clear. So sometimes, and I'm guilty of that too. I've made plenty of plans for people and not with people. So, and when we do transition planning, we need to be careful that there's ownership on the part of the individual, and they really feel like it's their words, it's their plan, and you're just the person there's to coach and support and encourage them. Okay, so let's put you in a different place in your life. So if you can imagine that, and some of you may be individuals with brain injuries, so I want to be sensitive to that. Others of you maybe not. Some of you may have had traumas in other ways, but put yourself in a position where your life has changed dramatically. One day it was one way, the next day it's another. You feel like you're a very different person. You've had some loss. You've maybe lost skills. Maybe you just feel isolated. Maybe the people who were normally around you aren't there. All of us have had this, maybe even if we haven't had a brain injury, but now you're going to be working with people to support you in planning your future. And these people are coming into your life, and when we come into the lives of individuals with brain injury, we upset their dynamic, right? You know, we're into their family system, and we need to be sensitive to that. But people are going to start helping you plan your future. So I want you to think about this for a minute, and then I want you to get into the chat box again. What would empower you or make you feel strong? Those people, somebody you're just meeting, sit down, and they're going to help you make these future plans. Or what are some things that would disempower you, kind of take away your power, or make you feel a little bit defeated or weak, or just like, ah. And just think about that for a minute and start typing them in to the chat box so we can see what you're thinking. All of us have had people come into our lives that try and get us to change, right? Or do something. To disempower, not realize where I am in this process. Yeah, to be sensitive to that, for sure. Thanks, Robin. Educate you on the pros and cons of choices, okay? Perfect. Do you have one, Wendy?
Not feeling heard when I'm sharing.
Okay.
Ideas.
Wendy, who can't get on the chat box, she's sitting here next to me. She said not feeling heard, right? Any other thoughts? Yeah. Accept my answers and move forward from there. Yeah. We can get judgmental, or we have a bias that we bring to the table. Always be sensitive to that. Would empower. Robin says, take the time I need to go through the process. Okay, yeah. Jan, focus on the strengths. Yep. Disempower, focus on weaknesses. Oh my gosh, we sometimes come from such a deficit-based model, don't we? And sometimes we have to help people with deficits, but we don't start there, right? Not feeling valued. Right. Thanks, Monica. Feeling like a failure. Success and independence. Great. Empower, try many ways to get to the goal. Perfect. Okay. Gosh, you guys have all kinds of ideas. Keep them flowing. And if there's any other ones you want to read out, Amanda, toss them out in opportune moments. Because, right. Thanks, you guys, for engaging and thinking about how this impacts you, because it's important to, take part in processes like this. We don't want to bring it to somebody else if we haven't tried to experience a process like this ourselves. So in a short hour, thanks for engaging. So here's the tools. I love this phrase, listen with the intensity that others say for talking. Edith Ann, if you were a Laugh-In fan back in the day. This toolkit is definitely about the concept of listening over talking. And if you know anything about coaching practices or motivational interviewing, it's based on that, which is the most research-based stuff we could pull to create the toolkit. Okay, so the tools. I think the listening is the key thing I wanted to share here. They're meant to be completed with students, not for them. Oftentimes when I'm sitting with somebody, I'll sit next to them, not across from them. So it's not like an interview situation. It's we are together figuring this out, because I also want them to be able to see what I'm writing. So you can't see, sometimes I'll show a video in my all-day trainings, but I'll always put the paper next to me, not in front of me. It'll be in between both of us, so that as I write, they can see everything I'm writing. And then the other thing is I always write their words. I don't impose my own thinking on what they're saying. So that's part of being a really good listener. We also know that visuals support individuals with brain injuries, so anytime you can have a visual while you're talking, you're going to do better. Okay, what's in the toolkit? There's some core tools and specialized tools. If you turn to page 16, you'll see a little diagram. While you guys are getting that page, I'll just kind of go through the format. For every tool, there's always a when to use the tool, the purpose of the tool. There's directions on how to use it, a sample, and there's a blank tool in the appendix for you. So it was written as though if you had no background in person-centered planning and this was all new to you, you can take this and practice it, because the questions are there for you. You can fiddle with those questions. If you have better ones, you can make them match your language, because everybody's going to come in with a different style. So, and in the core planning tools, I think of those as, it has the student map, the sociogram, an action plan, and community integration. Sometimes with some students, you can just use the student map or the community integration tool, and that may be all you need. But for many people or individuals or adults, you're going to pick some of the specialized tools once you realize some of the issues that are cropping up. So let's start with the first one, the first tool. Let me go back. When we thought about these tools, these were some of the situations that I had been in. I had been in situations where students wanted to go to a four-year university, but they were still in basic math class. They were a senior, and they had an educational assistant in the classroom, and they had no idea the level of support really that educational assistant was giving them in order for them to get a C. But yet they had a plan to go to a four-year university, but they were so not aware of really what supports were happening for them. I've had students where one wanted to be a sign language interpreter, but didn't have the language skills or the fine motor skills in order to do that job. And so there's a tool, that kind of helps with things like that when they aren't lined up, their goals aren't lined up with their skill level. There's students who wanted to live independently, but were unaware about really what that required. So there's a tool that kind of you can dig up some information for them on that. There's students who felt as though they had lost all the people in their life that was there to support them, and there's a tool that helps them figure out who those support people might be. So we try to look at all the people we tended to work with and then create the conversational tools that would best support those typical situations that we all tend to have in working with people with a brain injury. So the first one's a student map. I did not make this from scratch. This is the work of, started with the work of Tim Feeney and Mark Gilvasacher. I've made some adaptations to it, but just want to make sure I give credit where credit's due. So it's on page 19. If you can get to your book, I'm turning there too. And you'll see that you can see where that format starts happening, the when, the purpose, the directions. You can see that all on the page. So use that. They'll guide you right through how to use the tool. When I use the tool, I'm going to show you what it looks like. I really want to move this, but I think I can get to everything. I'm going to take you first through how I would use the tool by showing you the blank tool, and then I'm going to actually show you, we're going to look at one that I did with a student, and we're going to talk about how we take that information and put it in, how we might put it into a plan. So when we look at the this tool, I usually start, if I have a student who's pretty goal oriented, I'm going to start at the goal. And I'm going to ask them some of those questions, like, what would you like to have happen in a year? Sometimes I could go out maybe only so many months. It all depends on the student or the adult and how long they're able to carry information. Some people can't plan very far out. They need it to be more immediate. I think the most I would ever go out is 2 years. You'd have to have somebody who's really ready to be able to plan that far out. And you want the goal to be the thing that has the most meaning for the individual that you're working with. So I'll ask them about goals, and if they kind of have more than one, I'll just list more than one, because this is just a draft, right? You're just taking notes, and I might list more than one, but we're not going to aim for more than one. If I have an individual that isn't very goal oriented and can't jump right into that, I'll go down to here. Can you guys see my cursor? Type yes if you can. That I'll go right down to here with what am I doing now? Thank you. And because what I want to do is I want to look at what we're doing now in order to create the tension for where we need to get, right? So when I look at what I'm doing now, we're going to want to look at the good, the bad, and the ugly. And you can see some of the questions that are listed on page 19. Like, I always like to find out their school schedule. If it's an adult, you're finding out other things, where they're, if they're working or what their day is like. I like to ask questions like, what's easy, what's hard for you? Good old Tim Feeney, hard, easy kinds of conversations. I use scales a lot. So on a scale of 1 to 10, what does school feel like you, or what does life feel like for you right now? And if somebody, says, well, darn, life feels like a 2. I'm going to dig into that a little bit, or then I'm going to say, hey, what do you want it to be? You want it to be a 9 or a 10 or an 8? Then what would it take for your life to feel like it's a 9 or a 10 and an 8? And they might they can come up with the most amazing answers, things that I would never dream of being able to come up with. I always, if it's a student, I always like to find out what's going on outside of school, because it's not really all about school, right? We know that. Half the reason kids come to school is to socialize, so it's important to know what's going on outside, outside of that space. So anyway, I get the good and the bad, the ugly, and if they don't have a goal, then we're gonna look at that and we're gonna review it and we'll go, okay, so this is how your life is going. So what do you think? What do you really want to have happen? And then we might land on a goal easier. So that's how I like to use that. A good example, one was I talked with a student about his schedule, and he was cute. It was a middle school student, and he was talking about how much he hated his language arts class. It was just awful. And as we got to talking, he realized that when he was signing up for the class, he thought he was signing up for art, right? So we know that these individuals can sometimes be really concrete. And so no wonder he was miserable, because he thought he was going into an art class every day, and now he had to write papers and read books. So it was a good aha for both of us. And as I say that, you can look down at the bottom, and it says, note big ideas, loaded statements, ahas, or key learning. So when we get, we'll look at this later in the next sheet I show you that's filled out, but this is the kind of stuff you want to be listening for as they're talking. There's oftentimes loaded statements or ahas that we learn from them as we do this. Then I'm going to find out who they are, and you can see the questions are all laid out for you. Again, if you have other questions, better questions that have worked for you, use them or model off those and change them to match your style. I oftentimes kids may or may not be self-aware enough to to answer some of these questions, but most of them have some really good answers. So I also, in this, when they're talking about themselves, if I notice their facial expressions, like I see them smile or I see them look down because they feel, maybe they're feeling shame or depression or whatever, I note that when I write what they say down, and when I go back to review with them, I'll say, when you said that, you were really smiling, or you really sat up, or your eyes got really bright. So tell me more about that, because then I realize that those might be more important things to put into a plan. So enjoy kind of this idea of listening. It's super fun. I put in how do others see you, and I like to know whether or not they're accurate about how others are seeing them versus how they're seeing themselves. So that's been a key piece to creating some really strong plans. Now, when you go back up to the goal and you see those steps there, I really don't like to call them steps. You could make them steps, but I like it to be like, okay, let's review. Let's go over. We're going to review here with you, because I don't want them to have to hold it in their memory. I'm going to review this. I'm going to review who they are, and I might not read everything verbatim, whatever they can handle, language-wise at the moment. I'll review all this, and then the question I like to ask is, so what if we want to get to here, this goal, what behaviors do we need to change to get there, or what things do we need to do? So they don't always have to be step-by-step processes like, oh, I want to go to the community college. The first step needs to be, I'm going to call the community college, then I'm going to meet with the advisor, that I'm going to go to my class. It can be a lot more creative than that. I've had a student who their goal was, I want to be the second most popular kid in class. And I thought, that's awesome, because man, oh man, you've got a lot of things over here that you're doing, that life isn't going so well right now. You're disinhibited, you're telling people they have bad breath, you're whatever. So, hey, if you want to be the second most popular kid in class, then one of the things we're going to work on is, how do we change some of that, how we communicate with people, right? And then I might have a couple other things, behaviors in there. Students, you may not want 3. There's no magical, number. You know, maybe it's only 2 things that they're going to work on. These should be directly then put into an IEP, or what's it called when it's at the agency level? What are those plans called?
Either an ISP or an IPE. So
ISP or IPE?
ISP is individual support plan.
Okay.
IPE, individual plan for employment.
Okay, I have our transition network facilitator sitting here with me now, so if later you guys have real specific questions, she might be able to answer them. Note that you in Oregon have transition network facilitators in all your regions to help with technical assistance with seamless transition planning. Okay, so I'm going to go out of the slideshow for just a second, and I'm going to pull up this document. Okay, and I'm going to move this so I can see. Okay, so this is a student that I met with who had multiple concussions, and this was related to an accident on our ski mountain. As I talked with him, what I want you guys to do, you can see where he wanted to be an architect or work with his hands. That's what we ended up coming down to. I think we had a bunch of goals, but we ended up landing on that one over time. What I want you to do is just take a minute and kind of skim through here. And I want you to think about big ideas, ahas, loaded statements, or things that you just think are going to be key in a plan for him because it's just super, you think it could be super powerful in helping him launch. So just take a minute, skim. There's no right or wrong answers, and start tossing them into the chat box. I love this part. So you're reading, what am I doing now? And who am I? Yeah. Oh, please repeat the question. Yeah, just take a gander and see if things pop out at you like, oh my gosh, this seems real important. Let me give you an example. This kid talks about eating food a lot. I would want to make sure that he has access to food. It makes him feel really good. He also has a GPA of 2.0 but wants to be an architect, you know, so we're going to have to do some work on that. There's a loaded statement, I think, in here where he says, I want a good life for myself under who am I? Those are his words, and it's like, so what is that? You know, what is a good life for yourself? So toss out anything else that you see that's like, oh gosh, if I listen to this student talk, I would make sure that this was in place in his plan. Ideas? Wendy's sitting here. Do you have any?
I am. I'm just curious. Did you type this after you met with him?
Oh yeah, I type it afterwards. They're never neat. It's a good question.
Did you give it to them?
And they always receive a copy. Wendy asked me if I give it to them. Okay, as far as eating, there are so many activities you can revolve around food. Absolutely. Is he secure, safe in his home life? His support system there? Great. In this case, there was great support system. Although he was having some anger issues, so there was some work to be done there with his family. He was having anger issues with his family. Other things that you see that you'd want to make sure got addressed in a plan. Again, there's no right or wrong answers, guys. What was his personality pre-TBI? So you guys have more questions about, yeah. He was very different. So pretty easygoing guy. But now, you know, obviously there were some drug kind of troubles happening. So that's something to think about, be aware of. It's a red flag for sure. Snowboarding is under who I am. He kept snowboarding, just so that you know. it was supported by his family. So it was a key to be in there. If you read through here, you see that he's a pretty active kid. I would make sure that he had a lot of ways to be active in his day. Anyway, so you can see what ended up happening is he ended up with his goals, his behaviors he wanted to change to be to control his emotions, because there was some emotional stuff you could see in this list happening. He knew that he needed to learn how to get a job if he wanted to be someday have a job as an architect, and he knew he needed to figure out this GPA thing because he needed to graduate in order to go to college. We did a process that comes from Tim Feeney. I think he calls it, and Mark Ivelsacher, metaphorical compacting. If anybody has questions about it, I'll send you stuff on it. But we worked on what it meant to be an architect. So what skills do they need? How do they approach their job? And then anything he didn't have, strategies he didn't have, then we could work on those so he could become more like an architect even before going to school. So that's kind of how we took care. That's how we worked on. Use that map, and then he had to review it every day before school and after school, and he had somebody who was like checking in with him. So are you becoming more like an architect? How's it going with your emotions? Are you putting your plan into place for when you get pissed off? Those kinds of things. So that's the student map. Awesome. Thank you, guys. Don't seem to like school, but but he's social. Yeah, he is social. You want to make sure he's with people for sure. He had a youth group that ended up being an integral part of his life. All right, so let me get back to the right viewing for you. And I'll skip through. And the next tool I wanted to share with you, this is one I really, really love. Talent is a multiplier. The more energy and attention you invest in it, the greater the yield. The time you spend with your best is quite simply your most productive time. It comes from the work of Marcus Buckingham in positive psychology in terms of looking at strengths rather than deficit-based models. So that's on page 41. So you can see you're at the same kind of format. And here's what I love about the way Marcus Buckingham and his research and the Gallup poll looks at strengths and weaknesses. We tend to often look at them as if you're good at something, it's a strength, and if you're not good at it, it's a weakness. But the reality is, I can organize things, but don't make me be a professional organizer because you'll make me crazy, right? I don't love to do it. So you want people to be doing things that they love where time passes quickly. It's important when we work with individuals that we help them to imbalance their life with tasks that make them feel strong. So whenever you're making a plan, find ways to have a lot of pieces that they feel strong about be in their plan. One way to look at strengths and weaknesses or feeling empowered or disempowered is I'm at my best when, or I feel strong and empowered when. A little bit different than how we tend to look at it. So this tool, it's meant to be done like daily, where you sit down with an individual and you talk about the tasks that they do. So it isn't about the places they've been. So it isn't that I went to math class. It's what did I do in math class that either made me feel empowered or defeated or strong or weak, whatever words that you feel like you want to use that works for the individual. If you look at page 43, there's in your toolkit, there's a sample. And this was a student that I had sat down with and went through her days. Now, I think when I did this with her, I went through a week with her all at once, but she was able to do that. It's better to do it a day at a time. So somebody might just have to find, 10 minutes every day for a week or two and really to dig up what is it that makes the individual feel super strong, so that you can imbalance their life and bring more of that into their plan. So if you look at it, if you look at Monday, she had a test that made her feel really defeated. Then she played basketball and scored 6 points. That was really empowering. And then she had study skills, and she finished a paper with help, and she was empowered. And then towards the end of the day, she showered, and she felt really empowered. And before that, she had alternative school, and she had to work with annoying people. That says a little bit of something about, what triggers her, right? But then if you go to Friday, it's fun to see. She went out for coffee. She felt empowered. She went to get ice cream. Of course, we all like that. We feel empowered. She did more group work that she'd also done on Monday that she didn't like that. It defeats her. She saw her mom. She felt really empowered. So then after I do this with folks, we talk about it, and you can see at the bottom where it says, consider the tasks that make you feel empowered. What do you like about them? So then I'll just go through and I'll say, okay, so let's see, on Monday, you were in study skills and you finished a paper with help. So why did that empower you? I'll go to, your shower. So what is it about that? Find another one. Somebody was nice to you and that really empowered you. So tell me about why that was so empowering. And then I'll write their words down in this summary at the bottom. It's really key, these little summary pieces like the aha at the tool you just saw, the loaded statements. I always summarize at the bottom because we want to condense information so it's not too much for the individual. And so you can see that we realized that what makes her feel strong or empowered is connections with people, going out, people who are nice and say positive things to me and tell me I can do it. My study skills teacher, exercises give me energy, getting things finished makes me feel useful. So if I'm making a plan for her, I'm making sure that she has that study skills teacher in her life for sure. I'm making sure that in her day, she has opportunities to go out. In fact, I think we set it up in her schedule. She got to go out for a slushie once a week or something. So you can kind of get the feel for that. Okay, moving on. I have 2 more tools I was gonna go through, you guys. So I'm just gonna whip through. I'm gonna whip through these super fast, and I apologize. Or if you'd rather me just go through one, pipe in and I'll just go through one and do it a little slower. So I'm gonna start this one. Goal processing. It says everybody's a genius. Sorry, I can't read this. Everybody is a genius. If we judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will forever believe. I can't see it all, you guys, so I'm reading it without being able to see. That it's stupid. Now, Albert Einstein said this quote, and I think it's great. What we know is, of course, nobody's stupid, but what we do know is everybody has genius, right? So part of our plan here is to help people find that. People are fascinating, and before or after a brain injury, we have to be able to note that. So this is on page 51. And this was really developed because we have students who want to have certain jobs, and sometimes at that moment that they're not going to, I'm not a dream squasher, although some people think this is a dream squashing tool, that we want to help them know themselves well enough to find that place where they're a fit, right? So with this particular tool, you start at the beginning with that little cloud, and I like to have them imagine being a paramedic, for example. And then what did they see? I had one student who, one of the first things that he saw was that they wear a really cool uniform, right? They have a car that has the flashing lights. And then I move over to what do I know about being a paramedic, because sometimes these individuals don't really know what the job entails. Like maybe the doctor comes into the room with the stethoscope, or the paramedic has a stethoscope, and they talk to people and they get to help people, but they don't really realize all the other parts of the job. So we'll have a conversation that digs a little deeper into that. And then we'll go down to the next box here. What are the things that make you feel empowered or good? You just kind of went through that process with the task list on strengths and weaknesses. It's always nice to complete that because then you can fill some of this in with them. I always like to hear what they like and what they don't like when it comes to a job or just in life, because sometimes what we don't like helps guide us to our future. And if they're really, really perseverative and they're really focusing on this being a paramedic thing, I might fold this and when I go to review so that we're not getting confused with this, because what I really am wanting them to do is review what they've told me in these two boxes. So it says that's what you do, you review, and then you go to this last one where it says, knowing myself, I might like jobs that allow me to. So for example, if they want to be a paramedic, it might be that what came out here under what I like is I like to help people. So I would put, I might like jobs that allow me to help people. I might like jobs that are in the medical field. I don't want a job that has blood, right? So that we're not going to jump maybe on the paramedic. And then it'll go over here to some job ideas. Now, certainly they can't always come up with job ideas, and sometimes it's like, oh, your voc rehab person can look at this with you, and they can help you with that. So that's a quick look at that tool, but it's that kind of getting some grounding in what's the root. Why is it they really want to be that? Because there's always a root to why we want to become something, and that may not be what we want to become at all, but there's other things involved that's driving us to that conclusion. You do have an actual filled out goal processing form that got sent to you through email by Amanda. We're not going to look at it now, but take a look at that because it shows how this one young man went from wanting to be a sign language interpreter, although I think it's typed interrupter, and where he ended up landing. And what's cool about that guy is that he ended up being a job coach, and he was working at McDonald's for a while, but it all matched up with who he was, but he didn't end up being a sign language interpreter, and he was really happy. So take a look at that. Sociogram planner, I have running is cheaper than therapy. Sometimes it's the people in our life that heal us, not the professionals. So I'm not saying everybody should run, and I'm not saying nobody should have therapy, but we need people in our life to support us. So Al Condalucci has done some really great work, and this is a tool in the toolkit that helps you to help individuals with brain injury find who are those people that are going to be there to support you. And it's on page 27. And the sample, what's cool about the sample is it shows you how you can take this, the people who they love, the people who they do things with, and the people who they know, and you can block it out. Like if you know the person, let's say the individual that I was talking about that had this ski accident, he had a church group. So I would put a line here and I would say church, and I'd go, okay, so who do you love that's at church? Who's in your circle that you love? Who do you do things with from church? And who do you know that you're just an acquaintance at church? And then you can go and do it with other aspects and other locations in their life. And then I'll step back and then I'll highlight who do you want to be part of your plan? Who do you think can help you? And then we'll enroll those people to help support the individual in their plan, because it's key, right? And I have somebody stating it's not important, but the transition quote that downloaded from the link. what I like, what I dislike responses are switched, or at least I assume they are. Yeah, could be. Sorry. Yeah, sorry about that. Thanks for letting me know. Okay. So this is a super important key, a super important tool. And there's a story behind this. I had a student I was working with, and I was helping him organize in his classroom. I think he was in a health class. And he needed to be able to write down all of his assignments, and he needed to be able to mark them off when they were done, and he needed to be able to communicate with the teacher. And I had sat with him prior to class and done that, and then he went to class, and then he proceeded to leave the class, walk down the hall. At the end of the hall, there are 2 doors that went outside, metal doors with windows, like windows on them, and he punched his hand right through the window. He was so angry. And when I sat down and talked with him, what he said to me was, "You just don't realize how hard it is not to have any friends." And at that point, I went, "Okay, Sue, stop with the executive functioning and planning, and let's really get down to the important things for him, which is who are the people who are going to help him through as he's navigating this new life that he has." So this is a great tool that I think I use with everybody, this particular tool. And I really appreciate the work of Alcon Delucci when it comes to that. I'm not going to review this slide. You can read it. You can summarize this any way you want with the student. Just make sure that they own it, that it doesn't get put in a file, that it doesn't only get reviewed once or twice a year, but that you've set it up in a system where they're actually thinking about goal, plan, review, and seeing how they're doing, and they're rating themselves. I always love it when we come up with rating scales, like how are you doing on that plan for becoming more like an architect? Or how are you doing on that emotional plan? Are you able to do it independently, or with a little bit of help, or with a lot of help? On a scale of 1 to 3, where are you? Or is this great, or does this suck? You come up with words that really resonate with folks. They can create their own scales on different things that you want to measure, but make sure that's happening, because otherwise we know, and I'm guilty of it, plans can end up in drawers. Again, there's an action plan in there that you can use if you really want to nail down key steps and people have to sign up for their roles. Okay, here's my reflection. This is more fun than you think. Make sure you set time aside to do this with folks. Break it up over time if you need to. You don't have to do it all in one setting. That would be really overwhelming. It's a fluid process. Just roll with it. You'll have fun with it. Follow your instincts. Sit back and listen. That's so key. Watch out that your perspective doesn't blind you. We all come in with some biases or things that we think people should do, but sometimes they can come up with the most magical answers. This is too valuable to waste. Have fun with it. Always have a team in concordance so everybody knows the plan and has a copy of it. So for example, if you use the student map, everybody should have a copy of that, right? They don't have to be neat. Don't get too crazy about that. And every plan needs a champion and a coach to support the person. I'm not leaving hardly any minutes for questions, but if you have questions, maybe you can ask some for 2 minutes. I don't know. Sorry, you guys.
Hi, Sue. I'm just going to jump in so we can stop recording. And if you have a few minutes you'd like to stay on for questions, that's fine.
Okay, I do.
Okay. I'm going to